Hey, what's up guys? Today I'm gonna show you how to replace the fuel pump on this Volkswagen up from 2013 and a couple of tests you can do to determine if you need to replace the fuel pump or not. The fuel pump on this car is located under the back seats on the right passenger seat. So in order to remove the back seats, simply pull them out. Here is the plastic bracket which holds this pin on. So now I can remove the back seat. So again, under the right back seat, there is the fuel pump. I'm going to cut a little bit into this carpeting material. Next, with a plier, remove this rubber cover. Unplug the connector. You have to pull this red pin and you can unplug the connector. I didn't catch this on camera, but I used this improvised tool to release these two tabs on the connector. There is a special tool for this. You just place it under and pull it upwards. Next, I'm gonna use this special tool to remove this plastic ring from the fuel pump assembly. It usually comes by hand, but I'm gonna use a ratchet. There we go. And then it will come out by hand. Now you can wiggle it out. I'll try to not spill any fuel here, so I'm gonna bring a recipient. Try to not damage the fuel level sensor. Right, with the assembly out, I want to show you the components of it. You've got the fuel pump down there, the fuel level indicator, which is a potentiometer. You can basically see down there how those two pins are moving on that board. That's where the signal is created of the fuel level. Then you've got, of course, the wirings, which are quite straightforward. Three of them going to the sensor. And on the fuel pump, fortunately, there is the polarity marked because the colors of the wires are black, both of them. The one on the right is positive and negative. The last pin, the more thicker pin, is the positive terminal. Another one is the negative. This is going to be very useful information on the next tests I'm gonna do. I'm going to use a voltmeter and I will probe on the connector. This one should be the positive and this one the negative. Now I'm gonna attempt to start the car. The car will not have fuel pressure, so it won't start anyway, but we should see a 12-volt signal on this connector. What I'm gonna do next, I will place back this rubber gasket. So in order to reinstall the rubber gasket, you have to place it first on the fuel tank, then the assembly will come on top. I will tighten it back. Now let's say you already got 12 volts at the connector, but still there is no fuel pressure in the system. So you can connect an adapter on the output line. Once the adapter is on with the shredder valve on, I can connect the gauge, plug in the connector. I'm gonna go ahead and attempt to start the car, and you should read the pressure between 50 and 60 psi. It was around 50 psi when I cranked the engine. That's normal. If, for example, find good pressure here, but when you go to the engine bay and connect your gauge down here, you disconnect it from the fuel rail, take out the fuel hose and connect it to your gauge. And if you don't read at least the same amount of pressure which you read by the fuel pump, it's a clear confirmation you've got some restriction around the fuel line. Maybe the fuel line is pinched, or maybe it's leaking, or anything in between that might obstruct the fuel flow to the fuel rail and further into the injectors. Alright, so I'm done with the fuel pressure test at the pump. I'm going to release the pressure, reconnect the original hose. Now, one of the reasons you might not get the right fuel pressure at the fuel pump or even in the engine bay is because the pump is not getting enough current when you turn on the key. So one test to verify that is a voltage drop test. I connected down there one of the terminals on the positive terminal of the fuel pump, as I showed you previously. I've got here the voltmeter, set it up to 20 volts. As I said, one of the terminals to the positive terminal of the fuel pump. and the second terminal I connect it in the engine bay to the main positive terminal of the car battery. In this way, when I try to start the car, I will read how much voltage the pump will get under a load. You can get 12 volt at the connector, but that's without a load. When you put a load, you also test the circuits of the fuel pump and see if there is any electric obstruction that might not allow full current to come to the fuel pump and help the fuel pump deliver the right fuel pressure. To understand better this fuel drop test, you have to understand how the voltmeter works. When you set it to direct current 20 volts, the voltmeter will read the difference between these two probes. And if, for example, you've got 0 here and 12 here, then you got 12 volts. So again, right now we've got 12.53 volts at the positive terminal of the battery, and we should also have 12.53 volts on the fuel pump when we deliver the full current. If there is voltage drop, like a restriction or resistance in the circuit, at the fuel pump is not going to arrive those 12.53 volts. It's going to be less, and depending how much less voltage is going to be dropped, the less power the pump will have and the less fuel pressure you have. Alright, so let's see right now. I'm going to start the car. Right, we've got 0.34 volt drop. Alright, so you could see with the engine on, the voltage drop was below 1 volt, was around 0.3 volts. That's a very acceptable value. It's normal with all the wires to have some voltage drop. If, for example, you see the difference of about 2 volts, then that's going to be too much, and definitely there is an electric issue. You have to check the wires further and continuously do the same voltage drop test on small segments of the wire until you find the bad part and, of course, replace it. Now, a final test you can do in the situation when you don't get any response from the fuel pump, you can go ahead and apply 12 volts directly on the fuel pump, and you can do this test in parallel with the fuel pressure test. That's going to be also a very sure confirmation if the pump works properly or not, and if it's an electric issue or fuel line / hose issue. The fuel pump should start, and it does. If, let's say, the fuel pump is bad, according to Volkswagen, you have to replace the whole unit. You cannot purchase separate parts. However, if you are more savage do-it-yourselfer, you can still replace only the fuel pump. You just have to simply disconnect the wires from the old pump and connect it on the new one, insert a new filter, and also connect the output fuel line to the new pump, and you are good to go. As long as the pump delivers the specific amount of pressure required for this car, then that's it. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.